Chapter 11. Sword and Rhyme. The sea serpent moved its head very close to Jack and Annie and hissed a long, whispery "sssss." The serpent's flicking tongue touched the sword for a moment. Jack's heart nearly stopped, but then the sea serpent slowly pulled its head back and began to uncoil itself from around the rocky island. The monster kept uncoiling its great body until once again one wide ring surrounded the cove like a circle of green hills. Then the serpent's head sank beneath the water with barely a ripple. It was impossible to tell where its body started and where it ended. Jack and Annie lowered the sword of light and laid it back on the rock. Then they let out a huge sigh of relief and sat down next to the sword. Kathleen and Teddy poked their seal heads up from the calm waters. "Burr, burr," they barked. Jack and Annie laughed. "It's safe to come out now," Annie called. The seals hauled themselves onto the rocky island. Then they plopped on their sides. "The sword helped us answer the ancient question," said Jack. They all looked at the sword of light. It glowed brightly, even though the sun had slipped below the horizon and the purple sky was fading into twilight. "We still have to get it out of here before it's completely dark," said Annie. "I know," said Jack, "but how?" "Look at Merlin's rhyme," said Annie. Jack took the shell from his pocket. He read the last line of Merlin's rhyme. "With rhyme and sword your home is near." Jack looked up. "That doesn't make any sense," he said. "Perhaps it does," said Teddy. Jack and Annie turned around. Teddy and Kathleen were standing behind them. Their sealskins had silently slipped off. They were human again. "Perhaps it calls for a magical rhyme," said Teddy. "And I am a magician, remember?" Annie laughed. "How could we forget?" she said. Teddy grinned. "I have gotten much better at my rhymes," he said. "Just watch." He rubbed his hands together. Then he carefully picked up the sword of light. He gripped its handle with both hands. He pointed the silver blade toward the treehouse on the distant sea cliff. Teddy took a deep breath. Then he shouted, "Oh, sword of light, now light the night!" Teddy paused. Jack grew worried. Teddy always had trouble finishing his rhymes, and even the ones he did finish never worked the way they were supposed to. Kathleen stepped close to the young sorcerer. "Say it again," she said softly. Teddy called out again, "Oh, sword of light, now light the night!" Kathleen finished the rhyme in silky language. "Me bri stroe brite." The sword began to vibrate in Teddy's hands. There was a roar and a blast of white light. Shimmering beams shot through the dark. The beams wiggled and waved, then streamed together to make a glittering bridge. The bridge spanned the purple darkness of dusk. It stretched from the rocky island in the middle of the cove to the sea cliff above the coast. When Teddy lowered the sword, the bridge remained in the sky. "Wow," whispered Annie. She turned to Kathleen. "What did you say to finish the rhyme?" "Me bri stroe brite," Kathleen told her. "Make a bridge strong and bright." "Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say," said Teddy. "Indeed," said Kathleen, smiling. She took Teddy's hand, then she turned to Jack and Annie. "'Tis a bright bridge to take you from my world back to yours." "You mean we can walk on it?" said Annie. "Try it," said Teddy. "Oh, man," said Jack. He laughed nervously. Then he raised his foot and put it down on the light. It felt solid. He put his other foot on the light and took a step forward. The light felt as firm as a brick pathway. Annie stepped onto the light bridge beside Jack. It was wide enough for them to stand side by side. "This is cool," she whispered. "Wait, do not forget this," said Teddy. He carefully handed Jack and Annie the sword of light. Together they gripped the handle of the sword. "What about you guys?" asked Jack. "I must return to my cave now," said Kathleen, "or my sisters will begin to worry." "And I will see Kathleen back home," said Teddy, "then return to the future in Camelot." "After you stay for supper with me and my sisters," Kathleen reminded Teddy. "Oh," said Jack. He wanted to have supper with the Selkies too. He wanted to spend more time with Kathleen and Teddy, whatever they were doing. "We'd better get going, Jack," said Annie. "It's almost dark." "Okay," said Jack. "Goodbye for now," Kathleen said to them, "and thank you. 'Tis amazing how you defeated the enemy." "The sea serpent wasn't really our enemy," said Jack. "He was like the Spider Queen," said Annie. "They both seemed really scary until we got to know them." "Yeah," said Jack. Will we see you again? Annie asked Teddy and Kathleen. Yes, I have a feeling you will see both of us again soon, said the Selkie. We will find you when you least expect it, said Teddy with a grin. Now, my friends, you must go. Night comes quickly upon you. Farewell! Farewell, said Jack and Annie. They turned and started walking up the bright bridge. High above the water, the sword's light swung over the cove like a swaying lantern. The water below shimmered with sparkling ripples. Jack heard 2 splashes behind them. He stopped and listened. Go, 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 whispered Annie. Jack started walking again. He and Annie climbed higher and higher until they came to the end of the bright pathway. They stepped off the bridge onto the rocky sea cliff above the coves. Clutching the handle of the sword, they looked back. The shining bridge shattered into a million pieces of golden light. Like the sparks of a firecracker, the glittering pieces rained down through the sky. Then they quickly burned out. The cove below was dark and silent, except for the distant barking of seals.